the name card with my name on it. Willa Hargrove Fenn, gold foil on cream stock, landed face up on a passing server's tray like a used cocktail napkin that had been sitting out too long. Beckett did not watch it land. He was already looking at Camille. We were at the Drake Hotel, 300 of Chicago's most connected people, filling the grand ballroom for Fenn Development's 10th anniversary gala. The room smelled like gardenias, an open bar, and money. I had spent 3 weeks helping his events coordinator finalize the seating chart. 3 weeks of revised layouts and calligraphed place cards and centerpiece decisions. And my name card had been at the head table, between Beckett's board chair and the Deputy Commissioner of Planning and Development. Beckett picked my card off its stand, set it on that tray without a word, and pulled out the chair for Camille instead. Her flare-up has been bad this week, he said, low enough that only the 8 people nearest us could hear. She can't stand for long. Camille settled into my chair with the careful movements of someone performing fragility. She wore pale gold, a small, apologetic smile that said, "This is so awkward," while her eyes said something else entirely. I did not move for 3 seconds. I counted them. Beckett finally looked at me. His expression was the same one he used in quarterly reviews when someone raised an objection he had already dismissed internally. Polite, closed, finished. "Table 9 has open seats," he said. Table 9 was near the kitchen doors. We had seated the junior associates there, the catering sponsor representatives. I looked at him. This man I had married, whose annual reports I proofread at midnight, for whom I had drafted, by hand, on drafting paper across 2 full years, the renovation of our Gold Coast townhouse, down to the original 1908 millwork I had fought his contractor to preserve. I said very clearly, "Okay." 1 word, then I turned. A woman in a navy wrap dress stepped into my path near the far edge of the room. Silver-haired, composed, someone's CFO or founding board member. She placed her hand lightly on my forearm. "You don't have to go," she said, quietly enough that it was only for me. I looked at her hand, then at her face. She meant it. She was one of maybe 3 people in that room who understood exactly what had just happened. "I know," I said. And I kept walking. The pain started in the parking garage on Lower Michigan, a low dragging pull I had been trying to explain away for 2 days. I was 9 weeks along and I had not told Beckett yet. I'd been waiting for the right moment, which I now understood had been a form of knowing. Some part of me, had already sensed there was no right moment coming. I drove myself to Northwestern Memorial. I handed the woman at triage my insurance card. The ER was bright and cold and smelled like antiseptic and floor cleaner, and the particular stillness of a building that never fully sleeps. The attending physician was thorough and unhurried. She pulled up the ultrasound on the monitor, studied it for a moment with the practiced neutrality of someone who has learned to let the facts speak first, and the feelings come after. "Significant hemorrhaging," she said. "Consistent with a threatened miscarriage at this stage. Given the imaging, we'd recommend a D&C tonight." She glanced at the door. "Is your family here?" "No," I said. A pause. In it, I felt her recalibrate her approach, make a small, imperceptible adjustment towards something more careful. "I'll need consent forms," she said. "Give them to me." I signed every page. The pen was one of those cheap hospital ballpoints that skip on the upstrokes. My hand was completely steady. When the anesthesiologist came in to review my chart, I answered all his questions in full. I told him what I had eaten, what I had taken, what I was allergic to. I was cooperative and precise, and when the sedation started, I closed my eyes and let it take me under without resistance. I came out of recovery an hour and 40 minutes later. A nurse tucked a warm blanket over my knees without being asked. That small gesture, unprompted, unremarkable to her, enormous to me, was the thing that almost broke me. Almost. I pressed the back of my hand against my eyes for 5 seconds. Then I removed it. When the nurse checked my blood pressure, my face was dry. I was home by 3 in the morning. The townhouse was dark. Beckett had not come back. I turned on 1 lamp in the entryway, just enough to see by, and went upstairs. I pulled the carry-on from the back of the closet, the small one I'd brought to Portugal on our honeymoon. I did not pack the cashmere coats from Bergdorf's. I didn't pack the Cartier bracelet from our 3rd anniversary, or the earrings, or the things that lived in the velvet drawers of my jewelry armoire. I packed my passport, my social security card and birth certificate, which I kept in a fireproof sleeve in the back of my document drawer. My laptop. A change of clothes. The folder that held my father's death certificate, and my LLC registration papers, and Ashwood Design Collective's 3 active contracts. Then I went to the study. On the drafting table in the corner, rolled in a linen sleeve with a ribbon around it, were the blueprints I'd made for this house. 4 years ago, before we moved in, I had drafted the entire renovation by hand. Every room, every proportional decision, every cornice detail, every sightline I'd measured by standing in the unfinished space with a tape measure and a notepad, figuring out where the morning light would land in December. 2 years of work, the finest drawings I had ever made for someone I loved. I put them in my bag. Then I went to the bedroom. On the nightstand was the watch. His birthday was next week. I'd had it made in Geneva, a vintage Longines movement, hand-finished, his initials and a date engraved on the caseback. October 14, the day we met. I sat on the edge of the bed. I took a nail file from the drawer. It took 4 minutes to scratch the engraving out. I placed the watch face down on his pillow. On top of it, I laid the discharge papers from Northwestern Memorial, the consent form with my signature, the pathology summary, the aftercare instructions. Every detail was there. The date, the procedure, the outcome. He would know exactly what had happened while he was pulling out Camille's chair. I zipped my bag. I did not look at the room again. I called a car to O'Hare. In the back seat, watching the city lights dissolve in the rain past the expressway, I called Vera. She picked up on the second ring, London time, just past 9 in the morning. "Tell me," she said. I told her. All of it. The gala, the hospital, the paperwork still warm on his pillow. My voice did not waver. I had always been better at holding things together when I was in motion. There was a silence on her end. "Flight?" she said. "Whatever's earliest." "I'll be at Heathrow," she said. By Monday, Beckett's assistant Tripp had called my cell 6 times. By Monday afternoon, my Amex had been declined at a pharmacy in King's Cross, where I was buying ibuprofen and wound care supplies for the soreness that still caught me when I walked too quickly. I paid cash. I had plenty of cash. 4 years of consulting income had been flowing into accounts under Ashwood Design Collective LLC. Accounts Beckett did not know existed, had never inquired about, had never looked at closely enough to understand. I had not hidden them from him. I had simply never invited him in, and he had never thought to knock. Vera's Islington studio. Ashwood's London office. A canal-side space I'd quietly leased 8 months earlier for our biggest project. Had good light in the mornings and smelled like old paper and fresh coffee. She set a mug in front of me and opened her laptop. "His lawyer sent a letter," she said, citing abandonment, threatening domestic account freezes. "He can't touch the Ashwood accounts. They're structured as an operating company. He has no standing. He also called your mother." I set down the mug. "She left a voicemail," Vera said. Her voice was careful. "She wants you to come home. She said you're embarrassing the family." I thought about my mother's voice. Its specific calibration of disappointment, tuned to me since childhood. I thought about the nurse at Northwestern Memorial, who had tucked a warm blanket over my knees without being asked, and how that gesture had felt more like family than most things I could name. "Prepare a return shipment," I said. Vera raised an eyebrow. "Everything Beckett gave me over 4 years, the jewelry, the bags, all of it. I had Trisha inventory and pack it from the house this morning while he was at the office." I wrapped both hands around the mug, 1 item per box. Fedra Express to his office address. "You're sending it back." Each package includes the item and a letter from a charity. I had each piece appraised and donated the equivalent value. In Beckett's name, to Clearbrook House. Clearbrook was Chicago's largest domestic violence services center. His name is on every donation record. His accountant will have to file the deduction forms. Vera was quiet for a moment. "He'll have to thank you," she said. "He's welcome for the write-off," I said. 3 months went by. In Chicago, Beckett filed a missing persons inquiry that was closed within 48 hours, when I responded through my attorney. His legal team sent 3 letters attempting to freeze accounts. All 3 failed. He hired a private investigator who tracked me to a Soho hotel and then lost the trail. He sent Lorraine, his mother, to my parents' house in Evanston. My mother called and said, in the voice she uses when she is saying one thing and meaning another, that I should consider what I had to lose. I considered it. I was finishing a set of final construction documents for the South Loop Heritage District, a $180 million federal restoration covering 14 historic buildings in Chicago's near South Side, commissioned jointly by the National Park Service and the Chicago Landmark Trust. It was the largest project of my career. It was also the project that Fenn Development had been lobbying for 18 months to serve as general contractor on. Having spent considerable resources trying to get a meeting with the principal architect at Ashwood Design Collective, who was, they had been told, extremely private. My father had been the public face of Ashwood until his death 3 years ago. The firm passed to me. I had kept my name off the public materials for reasons that made sense at the time. I had not wanted Beckett to feel outshone in his own industry, in his own city. I had made myself small with both hands for a long time. I was done with that. In November, the Royal Institute of British Architects announced their annual honors shortlist. Ashwood Design Collective was nominated for Project of the Decade. The ceremony was at the Barbican. I told Vera to accept the invitation. I was in the backstage dressing room when her text came through. Fenn Development here. Zone C2 tickets. Beckett plus guest. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I had cut my hair in September, sharper at the jaw. I wore a black structured blazer, straight trousers, no jewelry except a silver ring on my right hand that I had made myself at a metalworking class I took in October, the first purely recreational thing I had done in years. I looked at my own face for a long moment. Then I walked out. The ceremony ran 2 hours. I sat front row center, with the Reba committee chair to my left, and a Rotterdam architect I had been corresponding with about a coastal preservation project to my right. When Ashwood's name was called, I walked to the podium and accepted the award. In my short speech, I thanked my father, who built Ashwood from nothing, and told me once that every building worth restoring had something in it that refused to die, and that our job was to listen for what that was. I thanked Vera. I said nothing about Chicago. I walked back to my seat. I did not look at Zone C. At the VIP reception, I had been speaking with a developer from Copenhagen for about 3 minutes when I heard my name. Not Mrs. Hargrove. Not Ashwood. Just Willa. Said the way someone says a word they have been rehearsing in their head and are now finally, desperately using. I finished my sentence to the developer. "Excuse me," I said, and turned. Beckett looked stripped of something. He had always moved through rooms like a man who was owed the space. Easy certain, a little bored. That quality was gone. He looked like a man who had not slept through a full night in weeks, propped upright by adrenaline and the memory of what certainty had felt like. He pulled an envelope from inside his jacket. "The house," he said. "Fully transferred to your name, no liens, and 15% equity in Fenn Development. A real board seat. A real role." He set the envelope on the cocktail table between us. His voice had something in it I had almost never heard from him. "Come home. Whatever happened, at the gala, everything after, we can fix it. I know we can fix it." I looked at the envelope. I picked it up. His shoulders dropped, just slightly, the first real exhale I had seen from him in years. I walked to the document shredder beside the event staff table and fed the envelope into it without opening it. The motor caught. Paper came out the other end in thin strips that drifted down into the catch tray. The people near us had gone quiet. 15% of Fenn Development, I said, is going to be worth considerably less by Thursday morning. Something moved behind his eyes. What does that mean? At 8 o'clock this morning, I notified the Chicago Landmark Trust and the National Park Service that Fenn Development has an undisclosed conflict of interest in the South Loop Heritage District bid process. Specifically, that the applying general contractor is in a marital relationship, however strained, with the principal architect of the design firm. I kept my voice conversational, the same register I used for contractor calls. The bid process will restart. Fenn is disqualified. He stared at me. "That's a $340 million project," he said. "I designed it," I said. He looked like someone had cut a wire inside him. The professional lacquer, all of it, just gone. "Willa," his voice dropped, "the board, 800 employees. I know exactly how many employees Fenn has. I know their benefit structure. I suggested the health insurance restructuring that saved your firm $2 million in 2022. I set my champagne glass on the table. You should have thought about your employees before you tossed my name card onto a server's tray in front of your entire board of directors. He had nothing to say. Then, I'll sue. Tortious interference. You can't do this legally. Beckett. I kept my voice very even. My team has spent 3 months reviewing our joint financial records. Specifically, the co-guarantee agreements you filed with Midwest Commercial Lending in 2021 and 2022. Both carry my signature. I was in Portland for a 4-month residency when those agreements were executed. We were in different cities. My signature appears on documents I was not present to sign. I tilted my head. Your handwriting is distinctive. My attorneys noticed immediately. The color left his face completely. Those filings went to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit this morning, I said, along with documentation showing that the co-guarantee proceeds partially funded Camille's expenses. Specifically, a private treatment program in Scottsdale that billed Fenn Development under the line item Executive Wellness Consulting. His hand on the table was no longer steady. She told me she was getting worse. His voice was almost inaudible. She said, Camille's treating rheumatologist at Northwestern submitted a statement to my attorneys last week. I said, she has been clinically stable for 26 months. Her condition is managed. She is not dying. She has not been dying for quite some time. I held his gaze. She has been managing you. He looked like the fall was happening in real time, and his body hadn't caught up to it yet. I took the divorce papers from the folio Vera had handed me on my way in. I placed them on the cocktail table beside the shredded strips of his envelope. My attorney will follow up Monday morning, I said. The FBI contact is on the last page if you have questions about the fraud investigation. I'd recommend securing criminal defense counsel before you worry about the corporate side. I picked up my champagne glass. I finished it. Safe flight home, I said. I walked back to the Copenhagen developer, who looked at me with the composed expression of a man who had heard everything and was professionally pretending he hadn't. I'm so sorry, I said. Completely fine, he said, and signaled a waiter for a fresh glass for me. The divorce was finalized in February in a judge's chambers in Cook County. Beckett's criminal defense attorney had counseled full cooperation in the civil matter in exchange for consideration on the federal charges. He signed without looking at me. His hand moved across the signature line, the way a person's hand moves when the act is just the physical conclusion to something already entirely decided. Lorraine was in the hallway outside. She had driven from Winnetka in the cold. When I pushed through the chamber doors, she started toward me with something prepared in her expression. A speech she had drafted and revised. Not today, I said gently but completely. Not ever, actually. I pushed through the glass doors into the February air off the lake. Camille did not exit gracefully. She hired her own attorney to dispute Beckett's withdrawal of support, citing assurances he'd made and funds she'd structured her life around. It became a civil matter I was not a party to. Her rheumatologist's records entered the public proceeding. The story ran in the Tribune for 2 days. Fenn DV shelter donor implicated in fraud, ex-girlfriend disputes illness claims, and then the news cycle swallowed it and moved on, the way the news cycle does. I moved on too. There was a great deal of work to do. The South Loop Heritage District broke ground in April on a Thursday. When the light off Lake Michigan was the particular kind of cold bright that makes the whole city look like it's been cleaned overnight. I wore a hard hat and sight boots and a wool coat that wasn't warm enough. And I stood at the corner of South Michigan and 18th Street and watched the first excavation equipment break ground on a building that had been waiting 30 years for someone to pay attention to what it still had in it. The contractor I'd selected was a woman-owned firm out of Indianapolis with a 40-year track record and a reputation for doing what they said they would do. They were the right choice. They had always been the right choice. I had known it before the South Loop project existed, before Fenn Development ever entered a bid, before any of it. Sometimes you know the right answer long before you are ready to act on it. I had a 4-year-old girl beside me, holding my index finger with her whole fist. Her name was Rosie. I had started fostering her 7 months earlier, in the first weeks after I came back to Chicago, when I was quietly rebuilding the parts of my life I had let go dark. She had a gap between her 2 front teeth and strong opinions about every building we passed on the walk, from our apartment to her preschool. Last month, the adoption had been finalized at the same courthouse where I had signed my divorce papers, 2 floors up, which felt appropriate in the way that certain things feel appropriate. Not planned, just true. She looked up at the excavation equipment with the focused expression she used for things she was taking seriously. Is the building going to be okay? She asked. More than okay, I said. We're going to fix it. She thought about this. Do you fix everything that's broken? She asked. Only the things worth keeping, I said. She considered that carefully, the way she considered things she planned to use later, and went back to watching the machine turn the earth. Across the street, at the distance specified in a restraining order filed in January. 500 feet, measured and enforced. A figure in a gray overcoat stood beside a parked car. I registered him the way you register something at the edge of your vision. Present, categorized, then released. I did not stop. I did not turn to look. I tightened my hand around Rosie's small fist and faced the work, the real work, the kind that outlasts everything, the kind built to hold what refuses to die. The April light came cold and clean off the lake and fell over us both, and I thought about my father, who taught me to listen for what a building was still trying to be, and I thought, I know exactly what I am. Rosie tugged my hand. Mama, she said, watch, it's doing the big part. I watched.